Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you as always for taking the time to tune in. And today I'm delighted to be joined by entrepreneur and founder of Frame Health, Alivia Cortez, who is here to talk about the impacts of metabolic dysfunction and how to achieve metabolic health. Frame Health is an organisation that's dedicated to empowering women before and during midlife to elevate their potential. Alivia has spent most of her career as a marketing executive, balancing demanding work schedules with family life, and for years she managed to juggle it all until midlife and hit her health hard, which she has always kind of taken for granted, and then it started to begin to slip, and the impacts of that were quite far-reaching. Realising a need for change, Alivia dove into the world of wellness, becoming a registered holistic nutritionist, a metabolic balance coach, and an American Council on Exercise ACE certified personal trainer. That journey allowed Alivia to reclaim her vitality while sparking her passion for helping other women do the same. Alivia's goal is to share that knowledge so that busy, high-performing women can embrace midlife as an opportunity for growth, energy, and renewed purpose rather than viewing it as a setback. And here's the power of networking in life. Olivia and I were introduced through the powers of LinkedIn that came from a personal relationship that I should say, with Olivia's partner, Bob Mercero, who I worked with many moons ago at Canadian Tire. And Bob is literally one of the leaders in my life who I really admired and looked up to and have done since then, who's a male. Most of them were female that I have in terms of my little bag of leaders that I would come across and certainly reference and think about, what would they do as we go forward. And Bob had reposted something about Frame Health on LinkedIn, and I thought, now this is a fabulous opportunity. It's a topic I'm very interested in. So the powers of networking are absolutely prevalent for this particular interview, and I'm absolutely delighted to be able to be having this conversation. Olivia, thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, Gary, thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for having me here. I'm really excited about today's conversation and really wonderful things that you said about Bob and the power of networking. I couldn't agree more. It is amazing how small this world is. Yeah, so pleasure to be here.
Delighted,
Um,
absolutely delighted to have you. So, as I like to do with every guest in the beginning, is just to give us, I've obviously mentioned some of it in the bio, but to give us a bit of an overview of your journey thus far that brought you to the very brave and very significant decision to say, I need to do something more proactive about this than just for myself. I need to help create a platform that's going to help other women who have or are going to experience what I've experienced. What does that journey look like for you?
yeah, wonderful question. It's a bit of a long journey. I was raised in a health household before it was cool to be healthy. My parents were in California in the well, I'm dating myself now, but early 70s. And my mom made her own soy milk and sauerkraut, and we had sourdough starter in the fridge and kombucha mushroom growing in the fridge and huge gardens. So I really come by it honestly. I had such a great association and experience with health that it's always been a part of my life. I've always been curious about it. But as kids do, they kind of go the opposite direction of their parents, and I really leaned into the corporate world. I still kept my health roots, but as you noted, I spent, decades really as a marketing executive, love brand strategy, passionate for, the brand, leading large teams, wonderful experiences. But as we know, time in the boardroom, back to back meetings, it does take its toll. It's a demanding lifestyle. And then I hit a certain age. I'm a mother and had an ailing mother actually at the time as well. So I had a few life circumstances that all collided at the same time. And I really struggled with adrenal fatigue, quite severe actually. Struggled with some thyroid issues. I started noticing that I was retaining weight, which was very unusual for me. I didn't feel as clear and energetic as I always had. And I think you're right. I took it for granted because I had always had it as such a cornerstone. I had always worked out. I felt like I was doing everything right, and yet my body wasn't responding in the same way. So I did what most of us do, and I went and chatted with my GP. And she basically told me that, yeah, you're of that age, you're hitting some perimenopause symptoms. It's a fact of life, so deal with it. And left me a little bit stunned. I was like,
Wow.
yeah, no, especially coming from another woman who was, she's probably 5 years older than me. Um, so that didn't sit right with me. I really reinvigorated my passion for health. I started reading, I started listening to every podcast out there, and ultimately I ended up going back to school and I became a certified holistic nutritionist. Um, and really started to unravel what was going on for me and what I needed to do. And contrary to conventional medicine, I ended up fixing a lot of the issues that I was dealing with. It brought my adrenal fatigue back into normal ranges. The stress, the ongoing stress that we all, experience, had just caught up with me. I had an autoimmune thyroid condition, and I ended up being able to actually correct those markers. And I no longer have an autoimmune thyroid condition. So it was really empowering for me. And I started to see all of my friends struggling with similar issues, similar but different. We're all biochemically unique. And they were hitting the same roadblock of what do I do? How do I deal with this? I had also been raised vegetarian. So I was vegetarian for the first 49 years of my life. And as I started unraveling this, I realized that no longer served me. So I made some profound changes. Um, and then I stumbled across metabolic balance, and we'll talk about that more in a minute, but it really resonated with me. So I again went back to school and became certified, became a certified personal trainer, realizing that the cardio upon cardio that especially women have been trained to think that they need was also no longer serving me, and strength training actually would. So collecting all of this knowledge, all of my life experience, both, on the corporate side and the health side, and then seeing the women around me being challenged made me realize that this is what I want to do. I love to help people, and I launched Frame Health. I don't only work with women, but certainly my niche audience is, kind of women to 40 to 65. We teach what we know and what we've experienced, right? Um, yeah, so a little bit of a lengthy journey, but here I am.
That's incredible. And just, back to the experience with the doctor
Yeah,
for a second there, I firmly believe everyone is doing the best they can at that particular moment in time. But to have, what genuinely becomes a monumental conversation in life, one that you're going to remember for whatever reason, but when you're sitting saying, what's happening to me and what can I do about it?
yeah,
For that to be, a pat on the back and you'll be fine, just live through the next 1 to 15 years or so and see how it goes, and then you'll be out the other side as a new person. I'm paraphrasing, I obviously wasn't part of the conversation, but
yeah.
that's, I wonder, is that systematic of the existing healthcare system in terms of education and understanding and smarts? Was that particular person just having a bad day that day? It's kind of disappointing to hear that, I have to say.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think she was trying to do me a disservice. I think doctors truly do want to do the best that they can by their patients, but the conventional health system is challenged, as we know. They don't have enough time. They don't get the education. They education on nutrition and actually thinking about the whole body as a system, interconnected system, rather than treating just the individual symptoms. That's not a part of their current education. Now, there is a whole group of functional medicine doctors that are layering on top of their conventional education, and they really are looking at how everything is interconnected. So, if you're lucky enough to find one of those wonderful doctors, then it's fantastic. But I think not everybody is as lucky as that. And that really is where I think we have to take responsibility for our own health. Really think of ourselves as an N of one experiment. What works for one person doesn't work for everyone. And there's so much information and disinformation out there. So parsing through it can be really challenging. Um, but that's the state we're in. We really do need to take that control and have that empowerment to live our best life and do what works for us individually.
Absolutely. I'm all over that. I couldn't agree with you more. And being, my core life now is coaching. That's
Yeah.
absolutely what people are doing. They are, and I always commend and congratulate people for taking that brave step to say, you matter. There are only so many supports out there for you. You've decided on something a wee bit more personal on a different path.
Mhm.
Good for you. Let's get to work, because whatever has happened in their life up to that point hasn't gotten them to where they want to be, or they just need some sort of collective boost and such. So I know we've been talking, there's been some sort of terminology, you've referred to it a wee bit, but I'm looking for a Gary broken down worthy version of metabolic imbalance and what that actually is, and particularly what anyone, but specifically, say for example, women, would need to be aware of in terms of what that looks like.
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful area, really metabolic health. I think when people hear that word, they often think of digestion, like how is my metabolism running? How is digestion going? But it really is about how our cells are utilizing energy.
Yeah.
And metabolic dysfunction also, along the same vein, insulin resistance is really a key contributor to most of our chronic diseases that we're seeing today. So, heart health and dementia, diabetes, mood disorders, anxiety, unwanted belly fat, all of this really stems from that metabolic dysfunction. Our ultimate goal, we need to keep insulin low and slow. And how our current food environment and how our hectic and busy schedules are structured does not support that initiative. You're reaching and grabbing for that snack, and it usually is something carb related. If you're lucky enough to eat breakfast in the morning, often again, it's carb related. You go long distance without eating anything, and your cortisol spikes, which spikes your blood sugar, which spikes your insulin. So all day long, we're battling this. And I think, the thing that I love to teach and convey to people, just kind of getting acquainted with this, is that we have three chemical interactions in our day. We have three key times where we can really choose to influence how our body reacts and how our body functions. And I think that's pretty exciting. And it's a much funner way to think of eating and making those right choices than you can't have this or you can't do that. Um, we spend a lot of time, talking about food sensitivities and you can't eat this and you shouldn't do that and don't do that. And metabolic health and metabolic balance, the program specifically, is really interesting because it leans into telling people what to eat. What do you need at what time of day, in what quantities, and in what order to be as healthy as you can, to give your body the right fuel to function optimally.
I wonder, have you noticed any specific overwhelm with any potential clients where they come in and they say this is it's too complicated. I can't I can't add another thing to do onto my list of things to do right now. And I know that I need to do something, but maybe now is not the right time. Is there a
Oh,
is
yeah.
there a is there an avenue that you can recommend for folks to make sure that it's not overwhelming and such?
Yes, absolutely. I think, again, that goes back to all of the information out there and maybe misinformation. A lot of people are trying to do all of the little things. I need to take this supplement and I need to do this and I need to intermittent fast and I need to. But what they're not taking into account is our age and stage in life and what we actually need. And at the root foundation of everything is having this healthy metabolic situation in our bodies. And what's wonderful about that is it really is food as medicine. So it is as simple as you can possibly get. It's individualized, it's personalized, and I'm telling people this is what you need to eat. Here's the amount of food you need to eat, and here's when you need to eat it. So I really find that women, although they can come in and feel a bit overwhelmed by just what they've gone through, once it's broken out and explained to them, they actually love the simplicity of it. For once, for a couple of weeks and ongoing, I have my 8 rules. I know exactly what I need to do and exactly what I need to eat. And it takes a lot of the guesswork out for them without bringing in the element of, shakes and supplements and all other kinds of complication. Let's get the basics right. Let's get your body operating metabolically in a really functional way. And then there's tweaking and tailoring and, icing on the cake that you can add in.
And I love the concept of understanding what you need right now. So if someone comes in, say, for example, in a level of frustration and says, I've never had to do this. I've always been healthy. I've always worked out. I've always done this. And now look at how that's physically manifesting itself. And I'm
Yeah.
just feeling maybe some of the symptoms that you were talking about earlier,
Mhm.
Olivia, in terms of, just lower energy and
Yeah.
whatever else goes along with that, educating them to say, this is a, this is an organic journey that you're on
Mhm.
right now, and what worked in your 20s and 30s is going to be different than your 40s and your 50s, and it's just about finding that sweet spot, that, if pardon the pun there, but well, it's not really a pun because we're not really talking about sweets, but but finding
No,
that
it's
genuine sweet spot that says this is what you need for now, and this will be a good framework and foundation for you. And then, as you mentioned, you get the tweaks as you go forward. So it's more explaining the journey, rather than a quick fix. I think, and that's where I'm going with that.
absolutely. And, it goes really down, a little bit of the scientific rabbit hole because it's not just theoretically what do you need and you in the general sense, it's what do you specifically need. So we actually analyze blood value. So this program, Metabolic Balance, was developed by a doctor out of Germany. And he first developed it because he had quite a large number of patients with metabolic syndrome and really high inflammation. So he developed this program analyzing blood values and then analyzing the chemistry of specific foods, and then actually writing a prescription of specific foods for that individual so that they could heal based on the micronutrients and the enzymes and the foods that they need. So going beyond just the macronutrients, the old concept of calorie in is a calorie out is so not true anymore. Of course, we need to be aware of the number of, the volume of food that we're eating versus our energy expenditure. But it really is about what are the specific foods that you're eating. For example, if you eat 2 bites of protein before you eat anything else on your plate, your body releases glucagon. And glucagon acts like brakes on insulin, which is amazing because when insulin spikes and gets elevated in your body, it tells your cells that they need to store fat. So you don't want your insulin high. Insulin high wreaks havoc on a person. Um, so being able to really understand that and understand that, between meals, we need breaks. Like go 5 hours between a meal, actually let your system rest and let it rebuild. So I think there's a period of time with metabolic balance where it really is a little bit constraining, to be honest, because you really do want to comply with those rules while you allow your body to heal itself. And then it becomes more relaxed. Your body's able to handle more. It's able to process different foods in different ways. It's able to extract nutrients more efficiently than it could before. So that's the fun part of really seeing the transformation. Of course, people get excited at the prospect of maybe losing some weight, and it does have huge weight loss metrics, usually 5 to 8% of your body weight, depending on your need, but within the first 16 days as you release toxins and you release fat, and then 1 to 2% for every week after. But the really exciting part is how you feel, the mental clarity, the energy, the actual, functioning of your body operating in a state of health as opposed to disease, um, is the exciting part.
I was actually going to ask a kind of follow-on question from the explanation.
Yeah.
So there's obviously science based behind this that then correlates itself to the nutrients in the food. So the ability to be able to say, this is the plan for you for now. Let's see how we go from there. I was going to ask a question like this at some point before that. What
Mhm.
does that look like? Does someone come to Frame Health and say, Olivia, I want to lose. Is there a specific desire they come and say, I want to lose weight. I want my shape literally to look different. I want to release the mental clutter. Is it like a kind of a la carte type approach to that? Or do they come and say, I'm not 100% sure what's happening. I know that I don't like it. And then you say, well, let's do this foundational work here, and then we can work on the rest of it as we go forward. What does that process look like?
I would say to get both. Some people are very, very focused on the weight and maybe not as tuned into how they actually feel because they've been in a state of not feeling great for quite a while. Other people will come with obvious digestion issues and bloating and not feeling good in a specific area of their body. Um, I think for all of them, and there's so much that I've learned on the perimenopause and menopause front and what you can do to really optimize hormonal health. And some people are really more interested also in understanding how to change their workouts and how to adapt on that front. um, but getting the foundation right, and that always is my coaching to new clients and potential clients, is let's get the base right. Let's get your metabolism functioning in the right way. Let's make sure, when we go to the doctor, and you might be lucky enough to get your blood sugar tested, or you might have even experimented with wearing a continuous glucose monitor. That's so late in the game when it's telling you your blood sugar is elevated versus way back when your insulin is starting to be elevated, right? So even if you see some of those normal markers, and people aren't worried about it, if you're holding belly weight, especially, you can guarantee that your insulin is not operating optimally. So regardless of the issue, I think that you want to address and you want to tackle, getting your metabolic health in a really good state is the best marker. And, for me, that's just one of my pillars, right? I always want to start with nutrition. And for me, that is metabolic balance. It's just such a good program. I've seen people lose inches, change their entire feeling about life, through that component.
I think back to something you were mentioning earlier about the implications of chronic diseases right now. And I think you mentioned almost every single one that my mum had before she passed away. And I'm laughing not because she passed away, but just in
Yeah.
terms of, you know, uh, and from the west of Scotland in the working class situation we were in, nutrition was you're lucky we've got some food, not that we were ever on the bread line or anything like that, but this is what you're eating. And it's as simple as that. Lots of deep fried stuff. Or we would boil the nutrients out of absolutely everything to become this tasteless thing that we would then just put a whole bunch of salt on to try and make it taste like something. But in terms of dementia, in terms of, heart ailments and such, this would be an absolutely incredible thing to be able to go back in a time machine and say, because I love the approach of the food part, because
Mhm.
the food part is something for the most part that everyone can control. No one is sitting on your chest, pinning your arms down, forcing your mouth open and saying, eat this chocolate bar, hot dog, fries, whatever it's going to be. For the most part, you have a choice of what you can afford to do and how you can prepare it and how you can actually consume it. So I love that concept. The second part I was wondering about, I was going to ask you about resistance in terms of resistance to the program, but I think you might have already answered my question, because sometimes if you come to a practitioner of any description, there's certain people in the world that are quite impatient.
Yeah.
So they would be saying, I need a quick win. I need almost instantaneous results, or I'm not going to believe that this is going to be for me. But then you mentioned that within the first 40 to 16 days or so that you can see dramatic, benefits, and then it's incremental after that. So I'm still going to reframe the question almost, and what are the typical resistance points that you see from potential clients and possibly clients who are maybe early in the program too?
Great question. The biggest resistance, hands down, is eating 3 meals a day, which
Right.
sounds, I mean, crazy, but you try to get a woman to actually eat 3 good-sized meals a day. And so many push back, no, I don't do breakfast. I don't like to do breakfast. And
Right. Also, I
often
was
they'll
going to
say,
ask,
"Hmm,
sorry to interrupt, but that's brilliant. It's a really important point. So you're not trying to ask them to slow down to three, you're asking them to increase to three.
I want absolutely 3 meals a day. It's the foundational rule of the program that you have to eat 3 well-balanced meals a day. And I'm going to tell you what to eat in them, but you've got to do it. And it feels like a lot of food, and a lot of women love to use the term intermittent fasting because that's all the hype now, which actually isn't so great, the long stretches for women our age. But you have to eat the breakfast, get the meal, eat your protein first. Lots of times the breakfast plans will include vegetables, which for a lot of women, what? I'm going to eat chicken and vegetables for breakfast? I don't think so. Because we're so ingrained to eat starches and sweets if we eat anything at all. But if you start off your day that way, you don't get hungry. Literally, like, you do not get hungry during the day, which is the wonderful thing about the program, right? You're actually eating what your body needs. You're eating a lot of it when you start to think about the vegetable volume that you're eating and the quality protein. You have to eat an apple a day. That's one of the key tenets of the program. Apples, the old adage, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. They act kind of like a multivitamin, so super high in nutrients, but then also the pectin fiber that's in an apple works really well to pull the toxins into the colon and help you eliminate them. You're allowed to have like a sourdough rye bread if you need a little bit more filler, which again sounds counterintuitive. I can actually have bread. But for the most part, it's just really healthy protein and a lot of vegetables and some fruit, And again, I think popular culture has scared people away from eating fruit. It'll spike your blood sugar. And, fruit is good for you, full of polyphenols, full of good fiber, but you need to eat it at the right time, right? You need to eat it after the rest of your meal so it doesn't spike your blood sugar. You need to not combine your fruits so that you don't confuse with too many different types of sugars. Yeah.
That's it's kind of mind blowing for me, and that's why, apologies again for interrupting, but it was such a unique point that in my head, logic would say you need to eat a bit less, so instead of 4 meals a day and snacking in between, try and make it three. But the biggest resistance you've got is people saying, I can't put that amount of food away. I don't have time. I just wouldn't feel like it. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So one thing that I was thinking about in terms of what you were just saying there, for someone, you mentioned hungry. That
Yeah.
was the key word for me. And in my completely novice experience, hunger is both a physical and a mental
Mhm.
state. Where, sometimes you don't know, and then you have a rumble in your stomach, and then you think, oh, I think I'm hungry, and then you do a little bit of a retrospective, and you're like, oh, no wonder I haven't ate anything since 7 o'clock this morning, and it's 5:30 in the afternoon. I've just been so in the zone doing what I'm doing. And then, but there's also the almost, I don't even know how to, you probably have a wonderful term for it, but sometimes you just convince yourself that
Mhm.
you're hungry, where you're kind of thinking, it's been X amount of time in between my last snack, meal, whatever that looks like. I should probably go and eat something now. Sometimes the two will combine and it's actually, yes, it is the right time. A lot of times, certainly in my own personal experience, they don't. And sometimes I'm just kind of like, I probably should eat something. I don't even feel like it, but I know that I have something else on and I might miss it, and then I'll just be a bit of a basket case later on. How do you, I'm assuming that would be part of the training and coaching to talk about hunger and educate them a little bit more. Am I off the wall with that, or is that true?
No, you're bang on. And I think, that actually tracks back to kind of popular culture. And what we've been taught is, especially for women, they'll say you need to eat small meals and lots of snacks throughout the day to keep your blood sugar stable. But it actually does the reverse. Every time you eat, you produce insulin. And so your blood sugar rises, you produce insulin to bring it down, but then you can bring it down too far. You have a little bit of a crash, you produce more cortisol to release more blood sugar, and it becomes this hilly avenue. And that's, the term hangry, right? People really get true physical anxiety when they get too hungry. So if you eat something that's really starchy or sugary first, it elicits that response. As soon as your blood sugar spikes up and then it crashes, you get hangry, and it could be an hour and a half later and you're like, I just ate a big meal and I'm famished. So I find that people can either be scared that there's only 3 meals a day, so I'm restraining, or they can be like, what? I can't eat that much in a day. So a lot of training, a lot of coaching around that. But what I find naturally is if people can just trust the process for even 4 or 5 days, the body really flips a switch, and that's where you really don't get hungry. Like, you get hungry at mealtime. So after my 5 hour break of not eating, I'm hungry. You sit down and you're eating it, you're chewing it, you're consciously eating your food and enjoying it. And I'm very full by the end. And then I literally don't think about food again for, maybe 4 hours. And then you might start to be like, oh, I'm starting to get hungry again. So it really helps us listen to our bodies and understand what is happening and regain. And I think you were alluding to that, like regain that connection of what is a hunger signal versus it's time to eat, or my blood sugar is out of whack and I feel really jittery. So maybe food will help calm it. And typically it's sugar that helps calm it because our body prefers sugar, glucose, as a fuel source. It's very quick, it's very fast acting. And if we're eating all of the time, that's all our body is drawing on, and it becomes metabolically inflexible. What we want to do is have our body become very flexible metabolically. So, yes, after a meal, it utilizes the glucose, it pulls that into, for energy. But then you empty your stomach, and a couple of hours in, you no longer have access to that glucose. Now you're going to draw on your fat stores, and you're going to start burning fat as fuel. So, and we all love to do that. It's a much smoother, much calmer burn as well.
You mentioned hangry earlier. It's not a thing that I had a lot of exposure to, not knowingly had a lot of exposure to. And a
Yeah.
number of years back, my love Erin and I went with my son to Disneyland. And Disneyland is wonderful. And we stayed in the Disneyland hotel. We just had to walk around the corner basically to get there. And the two of them were miserable. And I'm thinking, like, what's happening here? And one day we'd went early and to beat a line or something like that. I can't even remember now. But I realised that we hadn't had any breakfast. And I'm okay with that. I'm kind of pretty high functioning most of the time, so that's no problem. The two of them, oof, not so much. This is day one or the day after we arrived. And I
Yeah.
was thinking, what a pair of arseholes, like what is this? And then every morning after that, I was up early. I was up first. I went over to the restaurant. I got a nice hearty breakfast for all three of us. I brought it back and I says, right, get that down your face and then we're good to go. And what a difference, absolutely literal difference, in terms of experience, in terms of their experience, my experience of them, and then the experience that we collectively shared of being in such a cool place. And we laugh about that now, but in the moment, what I'm hearing you say is it's not just stuff something down your face so that you start to feel better. There has to be a bit more purpose and intention. And if you manage it right,
Mhm.
these hangry episodes are going to be a thing of the past. They're just going to be something that you used to do before you worked through the challenges, excuse me, that you've embraced.
Yeah.
So I know we've talked a couple of times about the metabolic balance program. If someone is considering the metabolic balance program, what does that experience look like for them?
Great question. I really try to scare people away initially. So on my website, I have a 15-minute video and it goes into a lot of detail. I really want people to go in eyes wide open. I always spend an hour free of charge with potential clients as long as they watch the video and really talk through what they can expect. Because you know what? A, it might not be for everybody. You might not be ready. And then B, what's happening in your life at that moment, the timing might not be right as well. So if somebody does want to do it, the first 2 days is a cleanse period. It's not as hardcore as a lot of cleanses out there. You're able to eat unlimited amounts of vegetables, basically vegetable soup, and you take a magnesium citrate to kind of help with the cleansing process. So for those 2 days, you really want to be at home or somewhere, not in the office. Weekend's a great time to start. And then the first 14 days is really called the reset. So it's a really restricted time. There actually is no, and I'm a huge believer in healthy fats. Like healthy fat in your diet is so critical. But for 14 days, there's actually no fat. And that's to give your pancreas and your gallbladder and your digestion all time to rest and recover. So you're eating the protein, you're eating the vegetables, really drinking a lot of water. You really don't want to have a lot of personal engagements during that time. There really isn't a cheat program. And, when I first considered the weight loss that some people can experience and being at those high levels, it's contrary to what you think from a sustained, nice, healthy weight loss. But because you're cleansing your body, your cells are releasing the fat and the toxins. And because you're hydrating properly, most fat and toxins are released through urine. So the combination of the two really makes a dramatic impact. The puffiness goes down. And then after that, it depends on the person. So mandatory, we add back in the healthy oils, the healthy fats. But beyond that, some people choose to continue with more of that strict protocol for another 2 weeks, and some are ready to move to phase 3 and start re-entering some other foods. So you can re-enter one food a day, really understand how that feels. It'll be foods that I provide on the recommended list. If it doesn't feel good, don't do that food. And with that, we have to live. I want to see health and wellness as your lifestyle, not as a limiting thing. So you can start to enter in cheat meals, but there's certain rules that you'll follow. And my hope is that people follow these rules for a lifetime. You always eat your protein first. You drink water before you get there. On the day you're going to have a cheat meal, you might be more conscious and maybe you don't eat extra fruit or have any, starches. And I think changing that mentality from people of it's a all or nothing game, I think is the healthiest part of the program. These are the rules. We've educated, you've experienced how your body actually feels. Now let's continue this a lifetime. And you can go on holidays and you can fall off. I was recently in Australia and I definitely indulged some wonderful food. But your body can better withstand that and better recover from those kind of indulgences than it can pre-program. So the whole program is 3 months, and there are the different phases. There's a fourth phase as well, which really goes back into kind of setting you up to live just normally, but with these kind of health tenets in your back pocket.
Sounds incredible. And just thinking through, reintroducing foods and then, planning for cheat meals and such.
Yeah.
Do you see clients going through this program and then cheat meals eventually just don't become part of it? Other than maybe exceptional circumstances, being on holiday or weddings or events or something like that. But in general terms, I just don't want to. I just don't feel the need anymore. Is that something that people potentially might experience?
You hit on a great point. Through the process, your taste buds do actually change and they adapt. Food becomes much more flavorful as you start to incorporate the healthier foods and you're staying away from the processed oils and you're staying away from the sugar. So, yes, cheat meals do adapt and change. I love to eat out and, dine out. I have a favorite little Spanish tapas bar, that we go to sometimes. But within that, I can find the healthy options, right? I'm eating the anchovies and I'm having sardines and olives and enjoying some manchego cheese. And yes, I'm having a glass of red wine with it. So it does shift how you attack those meals. Does, a big greasy piece of pizza actually sound good to me? It really doesn't. Like, I don't want it. And I don't have a sweet tooth. And I find that's the other big piece. People have sugar addictions, and sugar is one of the most addictive substances out there. But interestingly, you usually crave sugar more when your protein is low. So, as you start to replenish those protein stores and you're eating good quality protein and you're utilizing those amino acids, so a lot of people might eat the protein, but they're not able to digest them or actually utilize the amino acids effectively. But once you start doing that, you crave the sweets less. Your taste buds become more sensitive to sugar and you start to avoid it.
And would you say that your body's more, it provides you more information during this one because you've signed up for a program and you're serious about it and you've invested in it and you're gonna do what needs to be done, hopefully for the most part.
Mhm.
When you get to that point of balance,
Mhm.
and then you say, what bad is what use the pizza example. What harm is it really going to do if I have that? Does the body speak to you a little bit more to say, whoa, what was that? We never planned on that. Yes, we can deal with it a wee bit easier, but there's going to be a bit of a consequence here. I think that's probably what I didn't want to say the word consequence, but that's really what I'm thinking. Does it become more acute when you get more information?
Absolutely. Once you get a little bit more in touch with your body and you start to understand that you actually can feel good after eating, not bloated, not, heavy, you become much more in tune with that. And yes, your body will tell you this did not work for you. So why continue? Or, you know, people are figuring out even their own intolerances, right? Like, you know what? Every time I eat milk or I do gluten or something, it doesn't feel so good. What I encourage people is as you start to repair and recover, you're actually going to start to eat foods that you didn't think made you feel good before. Now, that doesn't mean you're all of a sudden going to be fine eating pizza or a big bowl of ice cream, but things that maybe you didn't tolerate as well before, you'll start to be able to tolerate. And it really is that awareness of how food impacts you, how your quality of sleep impacts you and your hormones, how your hydration levels. I think often we end up underhydrated and not realizing why we're headachy and feeling a little bit tired. So it's that awareness and education of, and it goes back to you as an N of one. How do all of these things impact you and make you feel?
Yeah, I'm thinking here that like a lot of times I'll say in my coaching, you already, and it's not to sound lazy, but you already have the information that you need. You just have paid a different type and style of attention to it before. Now it's become more prevalent or more in your face or whatever terminology you want to use. you get to choose what you're going to do with that information as you move forward. And let's work together to see what that looks like. I mean, this has been so fascinating. I have a couple of very good friends, Pat McGowan and Barry Smith, who are into this, and they will be absolutely acutely listening to this and saying, "See, I told you. I've been telling you for years." My love Erin loves all this sort of stuff, and is getting to that age and stage where she wants to be able to make intentional choices that are going to serve her as she goes forward. Before I get to my last couple of questions, that I typically do with every single guest, I'm looking at trying to figure out, one you mentioned earlier, it's primarily with women, but you do work with some males. The one thing that we didn't hugely touch on, I did a tiny bit in the bio, but in terms of when is the best time to start?
Yesterday. Absolutely. You know what? There's never a perfect time in life to start, and it's never too late to start. And it brings to mind, and I don't think I've said this, but apologies if I have, Dr. Casey Means. I really love her work. And she always likes to say, our bodies are a process and not an entity. And that means nothing is fixed. Our bodies are recreating and regenerating themselves all of the time. An example is our skin cells. We recreate all of our skin cells every 28 to 42 days, depending on age and some other, inputs. But that's a really empowering thought. What you do today will actually create a different you for tomorrow. So any age you're at, do it. And it doesn't have to be done perfectly. That's the other thing. It is a process, incorporating health and wellness into your life as a lifestyle is what's going to have lasting power. I'm sure, much like the coaching work that you do, this isn't a one and done. This is an ongoing evolution, but you're helping equip people with tools that will help them on that path to become a better version of themselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So well said. So this is called The Best You. I think you're a natural advantage for this very next question that I'm going to ask you based on everything that we've talked about thus far. But what's one regular practice that you employ to give Olivia the best opportunity to be the best version of herself?
Well, you might laugh at this. I know a lot of people in my life laugh at me for this, but I would have to say it is safeguarding my sleep. So everything, I mean, I love working out. I love eating healthy. I love my mindfulness practice. There's so many other things that rejuvenate me and empower me, but sleep, I protect it against everything else. My sleep hygiene, everything that I have an aura ring. So the first thing I do in the morning is understand the quality of my sleep. And then I reflect back to yesterday and what did I do or what could have impacted that sleep. Um, and yeah, so I'm all about the sleep.
I absolutely love that, and I'm not laughing at all. I think it's something that I've concentrated on. What would that be now? For probably a couple of years at least,
Mhm.
where I'm primarily going, or I primarily started with a number to say I want to. I was typically averaging 6 hours, and I said I want to try and get 7 because I'm kind of fed up feeling done in the
Yep.
morning before I've even started. And when I get up and at it, I'm a-okay. But that it's uncomfortable. It's unpleasant, actually, is what it is. So I've managed to do that, doing that reflective practice. I now have a Garmin watch, not an
Yep.
advert for Garmin, but it was a wonderful gift for my birthday last year. And it tells me my sleep score
Yep.
every night. And sometimes it's a low number, and I think I actually feel really good. I felt like that was a solid sleep. So I'm not gonna do too much with that number. And sometimes it's a high number and I feel like a bag of garbage,
Yep.
and I'm thinking, right, well, I don't really know. And then the worst of the worst is it says no sleep data recorded last night for whatever reason. And I'm thinking, what? What am I what am I supposed to do with that sort of information? So I am absolutely with you. But then I do a similar exercise where I start to go, it was a wee bit later that I ate. I was a wee bit more distracted. I had the screen on just a wee bit, a wee bit too long. I didn't give my brain a break and things like that. So a definite work in progress and process for
And
for me too.
Totally. And really understanding the portion of deep sleep versus REM sleep and how important they both are for us to, the deep sleep with your full body recovery and the REM sleep, especially when you think about operating as a high functioning executive or, actually using your brain, you need that REM sleep to solidify those memories and keep you sharp. So it really is a game changer. It also plays really nicely in with insulin because if you're not sleeping well, your cortisol is higher, your hunger hormones increase the next day. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but if you don't sleep well the next day, you're so much hungrier.
Well, that's the thing, I haven't even thought about that. So I'm gonna pay attention to that going forward as well. This has been so educational. So before I let you go, I'm going to ask you one last question, and then you have a wonderful offer for anyone who is going to listen and if you pardon the pun for sure, digest the information that you have given us today. Where can people find out more about Olivia and Frame Health?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Because I've newly launched, I am still working on getting all of my socials up and active. The best place is my website, framehealth.ca, and I do have the 15-minute video in there. It's worth the time if you're interested to really listen through and understand it a little bit deeper. And then you're welcome to book online to set up some time with me. I'm also active on LinkedIn, so Alivia Cortez and again, Frame Health on LinkedIn. Those are the two best places right now to
Perfect.
reach me.
Excellent. And on
Yeah.
to your offer.
Yes, I would love to offer Gary's listeners for the month of August a discount code, Best You, in honor of
Right.
Gary,
Yeah.
and it's $150 off. So feel
Yes.
free to go and just book online. There's no cost for that component. We can have a chat. And then if you decide it's a fit, you're welcome to use the discount code.
Fabulous. Excellent. Olivia, this has been an absolutely fabulous, fantastic conversation. So much. The thing that keeps going for me right now is insulin low and slow. Low and slow, low and slow. That just resonated with me in the moment. So much great stuff that this is going to be one of these never gathers dust podcasts for me that go back to be able to say that that's another thing and another thing and another thing. And I'm sure that anyone out there who's listening will be absolutely, educated by it and hopefully inspired to take part in your program. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today.
Oh, Gary, thank you so much for having me on the show. It really has been a true pleasure chatting with you. I think I could chat with you all day long. So
Mhm.
thank you to you and to your listeners, and I hope to chat with you again soon.